I just think I like the styles of back then more than I do now. That's really about it. Just more interesting.
I really like it because I feel like I've not yet found my style that I really liked. So when I saw loads of celebrities wearing it and I wanted to try it out, I really liked how it looked on me. And I just like it because it fits me and I feel like it suits my likes and my dislikes as well.
Vintage originated in the 1970s and 1980s, when iconic items came into the public eye, and the concept of vintage was gradually introduced to people. Now, the global vintage market is well known. The vintage has gone from being a niche to a popular trend. Although vintage originated in cheap second-hand shops, it doesn't mean it's obsolete. People love vintage because of its unique attractions and benefits.
Because we're like recycling clothes and we're like repurposing like charity shops, I feel like loads of people are going to like thrift shops and everything, and that's really good for the environment as well.
The popularity of vintage has made more and more people accept and enjoy vintage culture. Now, there are many vintage shops on the market, each with their own style, and they understand the vintage preferences of their customers and satisfy their needs. These shop owners also have their own insights into the current vintage market.
So I am quite passionate about reusing different textiles and preventing waste products from ending up in like landfills or in different places of the earth that's not going to get quite cleaned up. And I do try to prevent this from happening. I think it's very important that we don't completely just exploit different materials and have them end up being wasted and people don't really get access to them when they could be reused or they could be like repurposed or remade into something else that we could use for better use. So our style is maybe a balance between 80s and 90s clothing, usually USA clothing, things that were trending in then. So we've got lots of Nike, we've got Umbro, we've got Fila, sweatshirts, Ralph Lauren shirts, cord pants, cord shirts, we've got different type of cargo pants, so everything that's just 90s retro kind of feel. That's like the main vibe of the shop. Also, half of the shop as well is rework different items. So if the product was not good enough to be used in the shop or bought by somebody else, it would be remade into like crop tops or into like bucket hats or into bags, etc. Like that type of style. 18 to mid 20s, just because the appeal does kind of fit more to that age range because the type of clothing that we see on like social media like TikTok or Instagram, that's where the trends usually come from, and those are the trends that we try to keep up with in the shop to make sure that we get a customer base coming in. So it is usually aimed towards that age group. I think for my managers, they grew up in the 80s and 90s, and that was like kind of their style that was trending when they were younger. And I think that they want to bring that back and give it back to the trends that we've got now because they feel like that's something that they can relate to, that's nostalgic for them, that makes them feel good, and they want other people to feel that, as well as the fact that they are so passionate about reusing different clothing and they don't want to have stuff end up in landfills and waste products and stuff like that. So they are very passionate about that. I think when we get things in the store, usually get about 3 deliveries a week, and whatever we get in the box, we will post on the Instagram stories. And it's whether or not customer interactions with the stories or with like different posts on social media, it will let us see whether or not those are going to sell successfully. And even in store, when different items of clothing are displayed or like reworked products are made and displayed as well, we will take note of which ones are selling best and we will take note of which ones may sell better in the future. And so we can like tailor the different type of deliveries and the different type of items that we get into the shop to make sure that the customers will end up buying it. I think it's very important for, and like I say, keeping up with trends. So we are very focused on different type of things that will sell well and what are trending right now, and then we get them into the shop, and then obviously customers buy them. I think, especially in this city, I think the vintage market is growing a lot because obviously the appeal is coming through. There is more of a trend to buy vintage clothing and stop waste products from being used. I think it's a lot bigger than it used to be. I think it's once again the appeal is just so big. The trend has come through on social media. Everybody's got social media, and so people just want to get in on it. I think a lot of it is as well. The style of vintage clothing is a lot more prevalent than it used to be. I think it's just a lot more trendy. I think if you even walk down the street on Northumberland Street, you'll see about 2 vintage shops. This one is on the left of Northumberland Street. Then you turn the corner, you see 3 different vintage shops. It's grown a lot more, and I think people would really like to make it a lot more popular than it used to be.
Vintage culture is loved by people. On the one hand, because of its benefits, its reuse not only protects the environment but also raises people's awareness of saving resources. On the other hand, vintage improves the memories of a generation, and they want to keep them alive. Now, the number of vintage shops is increasing, which means that more and more people like vintage. From niche to popular, vintage is on the rise. What will happen to vintage in the future? Let's stay tuned.